Hello there, and it's William Bird here with Chat with the GP, and welcome to this session on a Wednesday at 1:30, as it always is. And today we're going to talk about what I think in general practice is the biggest question we ever get. And that is from a parent to say, my child is ill, but I'm not sure if they need to see a doctor. And it's always that confusion about whether a child is really ill or just miserable and I'll get over it. So we're going to go through the signs and symptoms that actually make it makes sense really to understand how do you recognize when your child is really ill. So one of the things that we always ask is, what are the main symptoms? And they're down to two, and I'm going to summarize those right at the end, but it does come down to just two main symptoms of whether your child is ill or not. And this is not one of them. This is not one of them. However, there are some exceptions here. So when the child is ill, the body raises the temperature. This is probably one of the most complex things that the body is able to do. There are so many different cascades of enzymes and substrates that go on to try and bring the temperature up. And the immune system works at 30% more efficiently at a higher temperature, and the bugs, the viruses and bacteria actually get destroyed with a high temperature. So actually, the temperature is doing all good. It really is. And therefore, when we bring a temperature down, although the child might burst into life and be really excited and be fun again, what you'll find is that they actually will be a lot more, they just become more sedate when they've got a high temperature. And that is on purpose to try and help that fighting of the infection. You don't want a child running around taking energy away from their immune system. And a really big thing is you just give them plenty to drink and make sure the nappies are wet, or in older children, the urine should be light colored. So that's really the main thing you should do when there's a fever. If it gets really high and they're really miserable, then you can give some paracetamol and ibuprofen. And I'll go through that in a minute. But if your child has a high temperature and is comfortable, this is the important point. There is no need to give any medication. So a child has a temperature, and we'll go through some exceptions, at 38, 39, and they're not too bad. Let that immune system get more stronger. Let those bugs disappear and be destroyed by that fever, because that fever is helping your child become much better. So there are some exceptions here of how we should give medication and not give medication. So we shouldn't give aspirin to any child under 16. I think most people know that now, but aspirin is out. And also you don't need to combine ibuprofen and paracetamol. The more we give a child, the more drugs are going into that child. So just keep one. It doesn't really give an advantage because, again, we're not trying to bring the temperature down all the time. Don't give paracetamol or Calpol to children under 2 months. A lot of parents are a bit worried about that because obviously after a vaccination, your temperature goes up. So that's fine. That's the exception after the vaccination. And don't give ibuprofen to children under 3 months. So that may be new to some people, or as you probably know, if you've got chickenpox or if you're dehydrated. But you do not need to bring down that temperature unless they're very unsettled. So what parents do, got to get that child undressed, and you'll get nurses and doctors telling you, oh, strip them off to bare skin and sponge them down to cool them. No, that's a big no. The temperature is natural and healthy, and actually often the core temperature is a problem. So all you do is you put the layer of skin much cooler, and that drives the heat inside and drives even the higher temperature inside. So you don't, also when they're shivering, which is entirely normal as the temperature goes up, you don't need to give too many clothes or bedclothes. Even if they say they're really cold and shivering, yes, cover them up a little bit, make them comfortable. But that is the temperature going up. And when they're sweating away, that's the temperature coming down. Okay, all completely normal. And you don't need to give all these expensive brands as well. Some of these are so much more cheap and they're exactly the same. So if you're trying to kind of say it's only paracetamol you need, it's only ibuprofen, go for the cheapest. It doesn't mean it's any less value at all. Now, this is an important one. And I think parents and some doctors and nurses get a bit confused over these temperatures. So for most children, as I've said, a temperature is not a problem. But under 3 months, any temperature over 38 does need to immediately see their GP or phone 111 or go online. 3 to 6 months, it's 39. Okay, and if you haven't got a thermometer and you think they're really burning up, that's good enough. After 6 months, it doesn't really matter what temperature. And we often see temperatures of 40 or 41. And that's not a problem. That really isn't. I know it might freak out some parents when they see a temperature of 40.5, but as long as a child is drinking, and as we'll see, there's no problem. Any child, though, that has that temperature for more than 5 days of 39 plus does need to see someone. But that's unusual because normally these temperatures last for 2 or 3 days. So the other thing is this, and this is a really important part about drinking. If drinking less than half the usual amount, now if they're breastfed, it's a bit difficult to know. So go by the urine. So there's a lot less urine. The nappies are not changing so much. That is a real key factor. And that for us is probably the most important thing that we ask is, are they drinking? It doesn't matter if they're not eating. No child eats when they're ill, but they should carry on drinking. A little bit down perhaps, but definitely not less than half their usual amount of fluids. And if they're passing a lot less urine in the nappies, or it's quite dark and a small amount, if they're not their usual self, now, of course they're not because they're ill, but if they're not able to be distracted and they're looking in the middle distance and you just feel that you're not getting through to them and they just seem to be sleeping all the time, or if your instincts feel there's something wrong, that definitely is something we should do. And when do you call 999? Well, a first fit, a febrile convulsion, although they're harmless, in most cases, they're horrible things to see. And because you don't know what it is, you should really go and call 999. If the hands and feet go really cold, now they often are cold when they're really ill and when they get warm again, but we're talking about really cold hands and feet, which you can't warm up. The blue, pale, blotchy skin, the marbled skin, the mottled skin means that they're shutting down, and that drowsiness where you can't get them to wake up. They're feeling floppy when you first pick them up, and breathing very fast. So these are really clear-cut ones, and these are probably ones that you'd actually know about anyway. Of course, meningitis is the one thing we do clearly have to be aware of. Stiff neck, the rash doesn't phase. Go to meningitis now, and they'll tell you how to do that glass test. You can see it here, but you press a glass, the edge of a glass against a spot, and if it disappears, it's fine. If it doesn't disappear, that's a petechial rash. And with an ill child, you need to call 999. If they're bothered with the light, or if your child becomes confused. That's a little bit tricky because a lot of children get confused when they get a high temperature. So you need to have that in the cluster of all these other things that you need to be careful. So what are the two most important symptoms? Every time you phone up about your child, you'll be asked about two things, almost right at the beginning, because if your child is running around and drinking well, I'm afraid we're not that worried. We're not concerned. So drowsiness, not able to wake up, constantly falling back to sleep, not responding to your face or your voice if they're younger, not wanting to watch TV if they're a bit older or other distractions. They're just looking into the middle distance and you just feel something is very much wrong. And the other thing is they're not drinking. That is probably the key thing. And although it can be sometimes difficult to tell, particularly they've been vomiting as well, it's at 50% less than normal. And whether the nappies are wet or for older children where they're passing normal amounts of urine and it's light coloured, these are the two absolutely fundamental things. And if they're both okay, to be honest, we don't tend to worry so much, even with those temperatures of 40 to 40.5. So look forward to seeing you again next week. It's going to be, should I worry about my headaches? Headaches are another big thing we get in general practice. A lot of the time, people getting headaches, worried about all sorts of things. And we're going to kind of find out, okay, what are the key things we should be worried about and where can we be really relaxed? Good. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much for taking part in this seminar, and I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much indeed.